The bright side of addiction is recovery. And in recovery, you don't have to be perfect, just persistent. Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Scott. If you're new to our podcast, we welcome you. And if you have been here before, welcome back. And if you're in recovery or know or love someone who is, or you simply want to know more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a bit concerned about someone you know or love who's harmfully using alcohol or any other drug, this is the podcast for you as we carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery. And a reminder that you can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. Recent episodes have featured interviews with singer-songwriter Rufus Wainwright, Judy Collins, NFL veteran Jeff Hatch, author Anne Lamott, heavyweight boxer Jerry Cooney, and many others. Conversations also with everyday people in long-term recovery, sharing their story, their insight, their path. Now, in this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, a conversation with a longtime friend of mine. She's been on the radio show a number of times and the podcast as well, and I just love having her on. She's Judy Jance. Now, you may know her as JA Jance, author of a series on a Seattle police detective who nearly died from his alcoholism in her first novel, and then found recovery in AA 9 books later. Now, Judy is not in personal recovery, but Judy has lived in the horror of being with an alcoholic husband who died tragically of his disease at the age of 42 after going through the DTs, the same age as my dad died, also going through the DTs. Judy's written a raw accounting of her years in the family hell. It's called After the Fire. It's a book of poetry. Here's a quick clip from today's program with a poem from the book.
The bottle shattered as it hit the wall. I stood with arm upraised and knew that I had smashed it. It could as easily have been his head. The anger raged around me like a roaring flood. I wanted victims, and it wasn't hard to flush them from their hidden layers. I broke the bottles one by one with cool deliberation. By the very act of breaking them, I certified their victory. I took him to the doctor then, not because he needed it. I did.
Judy will join us to talk about how she navigated his life, his death, and her family recovery, plus a look at her brand new book. It's called The Girl from Devil's Lake. We will do that next. And later in the podcast, on The Last Word, we'll hear from actor Charlie Sheen on decisions in recovery. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. And if you'd like to help us financially or know of a foundation that may be interested in underwriting part of our program, we'd be ever so grateful. A reminder, our email address is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net, and we would love to hear from you. Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of America's oldest, least expensive, and most successful treatment programs. They are listed in Newsweek magazine's recent list of America's top treatment providers. Now, I need to get something off my chest. When I read or hear that a certain celebrity or even an everyday person has gone into rehab or gone into a clinic to deal with their alcohol and or drug problem, God, it makes me nuts. Calling it a clinic or rehab diminishes the importance of what it really is: professional medical treatment for a chronic progressive disease that may very well prove fatal without treatment. Now, please understand that treatment is serious, and recovery from addiction is a lifelong process. No one gets cured during an inpatient treatment program. Treatment is just the very beginning of what one hopes will be long-term recovery. Now, just as addiction is progressive in a negative sense. Recovery should be progressive in a positive sense. Sundown and Branch knows this. They have been successfully treating individuals and families because addiction is a family disease. Sundown has been doing quality addiction treatment for nearly 60 years. Their staff has been together a long time, which is very important when you're seeking a treatment facility. They pay their staff well, and they buy into the motto of Sundown: the patient is the reason we are here. And they don't just treat and release. They provide a sturdy bridge back into the family, back into the community, back into the workplace, providing the necessary tools to support long-term recovery. And they are a not-for-profit program. Their bottom line is not financial. It's all about recovery. And the rates are among the lowest in the country. They're located on 30 acres at the mouth of the beautiful Yakima River Canyon in central Washington, not far from Seattle. Now, if you go to their website, sundown.org, you can get a lot more information as well as see photos of their facility. It's where recovery begins. Sundown.org. Time for coffee, time for conversation. Now, one of my favorite authors is JA Jance. Judy has a new book out in the Sheriff Brady series. Judy is a very prolific author. She's got probably, maybe 50 books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. You might recall from her previous appearances on Recovery Coast to Coast that her first series was about a Seattle police officer who finally found recovery. That series is ongoing, and she will share when the next one is coming out. And as I mentioned earlier, she knows addiction firsthand, having lived with a chronic alcoholic who was an English teacher who did not allow Judy to write. He told her, "There's only one writer in the family, and it's not you." She still wrote, however. She wrote a collection of poetry that she put in her strongbox that chronicled her life and his death from alcoholism. We started out the conversation talking about the book, After the Fire, a poetic chronicle of Judy's journey. Welcome back once again, Recovery Coast to Coast, America's voice for recovery. Glad to have you with us. If you've been here before, welcome back. My guest this time is somebody who's been on the program a number of times, and not only as a guest, but as a good friend, and that's Judy Jance. She writes under the name of JA Jance, and we're going to get to why she uses that pen name a little bit later on in the interview. But Judy is a very, very prolific writer. She's got 3 series with, of course, JP Beaumont, who is the recovering alcoholic former detective, Seattle Police Department, and she's working on a new JP Beaumont book as we speak. She also has a series with former LA newscaster Allie Reynolds. I believe there's about 20 of those. And then, of course, the feisty Joanna Brady.
And then there are the Walker family books set on the reservation. So there are actually 4 series instead of just...
So she has been writing, and hope she never stops writing, to be honest with you. I love her writing, and I love her. And I want to start first by talking about her first efforts on writing, and that was poetry. I am looking at, I have them on my desk, 3 different versions of your book, After the Fire. The first one was Lance Publications. The second one was the University of Arizona. And the third one, HarperCollins.
The first edition was a chapbook that was self-published. It came out in 1984, but it's been in print from HarperCollins since, I think, for the last 13 years or so. There's a reason my detective, my first series with JP Beaumont, there's a reason he is in that book and in several books after that. He's a non-recovering alcoholic. I spent 18 years of my life, 13 years of those married to a man who died of chronic alcoholism at age 42, a year and a half after I divorced him. He was allowed in the creative writing program that was closed to me because I was a girl. But when we first married, he told me, well, there's only going to be one writer in our family, and I'm it. By the way, he got a good grade in his creative writing class primarily because I had edited his papers, but that's another story. But I wanted to be married, so I put my writing ambitions on hold. Then we were teaching on the reservation. We lived in a house that was 30 miles from town in either direction, 2 miles off the highway, 7 miles to the nearest neighbor indoor telephone. This was in the late 60s when there were exactly 3 television channels on an antenna if you could get them. And so we'd come home from school. He'd be passed out cold in his recliner by 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And I was there by myself and supposed to be writing. But I'd sit at the dining room table and jot off these little pieces of poetry. At the time, I thought I was being true to myself, but I had no idea I was writing anything that was actually personal. I knew my husband was a drinker when I first started dating him. I made the mistake so many people do. They say, well, this is just a little problem and we'll be able to fix it. But it wasn't fixable. I stayed with him while he was hospitalized 9 times for chronic alcoholism. And finally, in 1980, when he showed up at my son's T-ball game, so drunk that he crawled on his hands and knees from the bleachers back to the car, that's when I realized I had to get a divorce. So I did. I got a divorce and moved to Seattle. I gave myself permission to start writing. In 1982, a year and a half after I divorced him, my husband died. When I wrote the poetry, he never saw it because I wasn't supposed to be writing, so I hid it in the strongbox. In 1982, his mother was coming to visit for Thanksgiving. After months of drinking steadily, he went off booze cold turkey. He was hospitalized he went into DTs, was hospitalized with no kidney or liver function, and died a month later. When I went to get out the documents you have to present when someone passes away, I discovered all the poetry, and reading back through it was like seeing my life in instant replay. And I could see that the creative part of me clearly saw what was going on in the relationship long before the conscious part of me was willing to accept it. Denial is real. I showed someone the poems. They said this should be a book, and that's After the Fire. I was in Phoenix last year, but what people don't understand about living in an addictive relationship is that it's very terribly isolating, because it's just like someone having a major medical diagnosis. Friends sort of drift away because they don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. And they don't want to be caught up in the drama. I think that I was more than slightly crazy. One of the poems in After the Fire is called Breakage. It happened on a Saturday afternoon in Phoenix. The bottle shattered as it hit the wall. I stood with arm upraised and knew that I had smashed it. It could as easily have been his head. The anger raged around me like a roaring flood. I wanted victims, and it wasn't hard to flush them from their hidden layers. I broke the bottles one by one with cool deliberation. By the very act of breaking them, I certified their victory. I took him to the doctor then, not because he needed it. I did. I was stone cold crazy at that point, and it was dangerous for him to be in the house, and I was nuts. After the Fire is the story of that journey. The title poem goes like this: I have touched the fire. It burned me, but I knew I lived. It seared me, but it made me whole. He called me. I went gladly, though I saw the rocks, fell laughing through the singeing air. I have known the fire. I'll live with nothing rather than with less. The flame is out. There's nothing left but ash. And what I want people to get out of reading that book and reading that poetry and traveling on that journey is that my entire 40-year writing career of almost 70 books came after living through that fire, after surviving that emotional hit. Last year in Phoenix, the woman in the second row said, reading After the Fire saved my life.
Oh.
Everything that went on in our household was a secret. After I read After the Fire, I knew I didn't have to keep those secrets anymore. I want people to know about that book because it's a tiny book, but it's really important. It gets through to people. Having your parents say, oh, the guy's a bum, you should divorce him. Witnessing what's going on by someone who's still in the trenches is different. And I know that it has been helpful to many people. A local bookstore here in the Seattle area, brick and mortar books. When they get an order for After the Fire, they know that I will come over and sign it before it goes out.
Nice.
So if people are interested in laying hands on that, please consider contacting Brick and Mortar Books in Redmond.
Well, it's an amazing book. It's an important book, and I was privileged to write the blurb on the back of the book, in which I wrote, before the novels, there was After the Fire, an incredible collection of truth and courage. It's an intensely personal look at life, death, and recovery. And you have recovered amazingly well.
The thing is, when I started writing Beaumont, I wasn't allowed in the creative writing program at the University of Arizona, but I was smart enough to figure out you write what you know, and I happen to know a lot about drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Beau do the kind of drinking that I had lived with for all those years. I thought I was just writing a book, but my readers, 4 books in, were the ones that said to me, hey, Beau drinks every day. He has a drink of choice. It's starting to interfere with his work. Does he have a problem? And that was a surprise to me. I said, these are books. But I had based that character, modeled that character after someone who was a problem drinker. It always amazes me that my readers figured it out before I did.
That was a literary intervention, Judy.
Yes, literary. Exactly. But if I had just been writing about Beaumont, he would have been dead after 9 books because I was getting tired of him. And that's when my editors suggested I write something else. I wrote the first Walker family book, Hour of the Hunter, and then I wrote the first Joanna Brady book. The Girl from Devil's Lake is Joanna Brady number 21. I don't outline my books. I start at the beginning and I write to the end. But I knew that I was writing a new series, and so I needed to introduce those characters. So in Desert Heat, the very first Joanna book, Joanna is in her late 20s. She is sitting in her kitchen with her mother, Eleanor Lathrop, and her daughter, her 9-year-old daughter, Jenny. They're waiting for Joanna's husband, Andy, to come home from work so he and Joanna can go out to celebrate their anniversary. And Eleanor is there to take care of Jenny while they're out for the evening. So Jenny, who is this smart little kid, is in the 3rd grade. She has had just a smidgen of sex ed at Greenway School. And so she pipes up and asks her mom, was I a preemie? Well, of course, she was not a preemie. She was on time. The wedding was late. And it's a situation, the fact that her daughter got knocked up in high school is something that has still, her mother is still on the warpath about that. So Jenny might just as well have lobbed a hand grenade into the middle of the conversation. But that scene sets in motion a ribbon of storyline that goes through the whole book. So in Desert Heat, book number 1, Jenny was 9 years old. Now, the readers of that series have watched her grow up. She's graduated from college. She's spent 2 years working as an intern for a national law enforcement agency missing and endangered Indigenous people. And now she is about to graduate from the same police academy that her mother graduated from years earlier. And Joanna is on her way to Phoenix to speak at Jenny's graduation. So that's one of the things about writing series. You get to watch people grow and change over the years. In the Beaumont books, it's book 7 when he has a blackout that he can't talk away. In book 8, he's in recovery. And so there have been a lot more books now with him in recovery than there were when he was drinking, but I still have people who tell me they liked him better when he was a drunk. I worry about those folks.
Oh, my gosh. All of the characters in all of your series, they become like old friends. When I pick up your books, it's like I'm reuniting with whether it's Joanna Brady or whether it's Allie and the family and with Beau. It's amazing how you have been able to have the continuity in all 3 of those series.
I think having that continuity and seeing those people in changing circumstances over the years is one of the things that has kept me interested in them. I couldn't have left Beau stuck in the 80s because the 80s weren't that good to me. In this book, people who know that Joanna Brady is set in southeastern Arizona. We'll be surprised to discover that on page 1, they're in a little town in western Minnesota called Fertile, and the year is 1956. And that's where we encounter a troubled kid named Stephen Roper, who despises his step-grandmother. And so, at age 11, not only does he murder her, he gets away with it. And that sets him on a journey of being a serial killer and murdering people from coast to coast and from border to border over decades while posing as an ordinary person. Eventually, he ends up as a teacher in Bisbee, Arizona, and he spends the school year being a teacher, and then he goes on summer vacation and murders people.
He was Joanna's English teacher.
He was Joanna's high school English teacher, and he gave her a bad grade, too.
Yeah, I read that.
The thing is, Stephen Roper's story is sort of like wallpaper in the background with Joanna's story of dealing with a murder of a little boy found in the debris under a flooded bridge on Thanksgiving Day. That is the case that brings her face to face eventually with this monster.
Well, the book is chilling. It has so many twists and turns, full of suspense, intrigue, and it's also educational. One of the things that I learned, which you will probably find to be a bit bizarre, I found out about medulla oblongata, which I had no idea what the heck it was, and it sent me scurrying to the dictionary to find out that it's a very important...
An important part of human physiognomy.
Yeah.
I can't say that word.
Yeah, I know exactly what you... Yeah.
It's what keeps everything running. If you screw that up,
absolutely.
You're toast.
You know, things like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, it's the brainstem plays that crucial role in regulating essential body functions. So I did not know what that was, and I wanted to go, I got to find out. So the book is educational.
I've seen it only once, but you can see a 12-foot tall wall of brown water come crashing down that riverbed. It's amazing.
Judy, what are you working on now? Obviously, this book just came out, but it was finished, I'm sure, eons ago, and now you're deep into, I know, another JP Beaumont. But what's the next published work?
The next Allie Reynolds book is written. That one is called Smoke and Mirrors. That one's in New York, starting the editing process. And I'm working on the next Beaumont. It's called Fool's Errand, and it brings in a character that I met once in Nothing to Lose, Twinkle Winkleman from Anchorage, Alaska. And Twink is back in this one, so that's fun.
Love that name.
When I first thought up that name, Twinkle Winkleman, it made me laugh out loud. And as soon as I got to know her a little better, I knew that she had to be a gearhead and she had to have an antique International Harvester Travelall as her go-to vehicle.
Well, the book is called The Girl from Devil's Lake. You don't have to read the entire series to get to this. You can start with this, and if you'll be as taken in as certainly I was and many of my friends, you will want to go back to the beginning and follow along with the timeline of Joanna Brady.
Don't worry about jumping into one of my books in midstream. People have told me over the years that reading my books is like eating Fritos. You don't read just one.
That's right.
And so if I've done the job right, you're going to want to go back to the beginning then and find out how all this came about. A couple months ago, I heard from a fan who wanted all the Beaumont books. And that bookstore in Redmond, brick and mortar, ordered every single one of them. And when I went over to sign a few Girl from Devil's Lake for them, they had a box with 40 years worth of Beaumonts waiting to be signed as well.
Tell listeners about your website.
It's the author, JA Jance official author website. It has my blog, which posts every Friday morning. When I was at college, I was only 100 miles from home, but those were the days of long-distance phone calls, and they were expensive. So every Tuesday, my mother, with 4 kids still at home, would sit down at the kitchen table and write me a letter letting me know what was going on with the family and the neighbors and in town. And those letters always showed up in my dorm mailbox every Friday morning. In honor of my mother, my blog posts every Friday morning. And it's a letter to my fans, giving them a window on my week, a window on my life. of that in that week. Some of it is about writing, some of it is about family, some of it is reminiscing. I try to write something that will brighten the corner where I am every Friday morning for my readers.
And you do something very unique. I feel unique. I don't know any other authors that do this, but you answer every single email that you receive.
Yes, I do. And I even answer the cranky ones, and I've turned more than one cranky writer into a fan.
That's amazing. Judy, thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, I want to go back to what I said at the very beginning of the interview. And if you would quickly share the story of why you use the name or the pen name JA Jance instead of Judy Jance.
Well, when I sent my first manuscript to my agent, I signed it Judith A. Jance. But she knew that there was a lot of anti-female writer prejudice in the world of New York publishing. So she changed the title page to read Unto Proven Guilty by J.A. Jance. The second editor who read it called her up and said, boy, the guy who wrote Unto Proven Guilty is a good writer. And she said, well, what would you say if I told you the guy who wrote Until Proven Guilty is a woman? And he said, I'd say she was a hell of a good writer. So they bought it. And then in March of '83, the manuscript went to marketing, and they said, wait a minute, male readers are not going to accept a police procedural written by somebody named Judy. They wanted to use my initials. And I said, I'm from Bisbee, Arizona. I'm a small town girl being published by a New York publisher. And I said, sure, I'm happy to use my initials. So that's where Judith Ann got changed to J.A. For the first 9 books, there was no author bio, there was no author photo. And that gave rise to the rumor that a Seattle homicide cop writes these books. When they started putting my photo on the books, I thought that rumor would go away, but it just changed. Then people started saying, a retired Seattle homicide cop writes these books, and she's his stand-in.
Wow.
But people have gotten used to it, and I have a lot of male readers, and I have a lot of male readers who are in law enforcement. That always really touches me.
Mm. Well, the new book again, J.A. Jance, The Girl from Devil's Lake, highly recommend it. It's full of suspense and twists and turns and a true page-turner. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again when Smoke and Mirrors hits the newsstands.
Okay, good to talk to you, Neil, and I'm always glad to talk to your folks.
Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Judy Jance. The new book is called The Girl from Devil's Lake, and it is available at independent bookstores, which we certainly urge you to support, as well as the usual online booksellers. By the way, I want to remind listeners of this podcast that if you would like to tell your story of recovery, regardless of the path you've chosen, and as long as you have been in continuous recovery for a year or more, drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. We can arrange a phone call and do it over the phone line. Now, coming up next, The Last Word. Today featuring actor Charlie Sheen on decisions in recovery. We will have that for you in just 30 seconds.
She has always been your baby. But when your daughter got into drugs and alcohol, she turned into a stranger. What do you do? Where do you turn? Contact Sundown M Ranch. Sundown's nationally recognized youth treatment program guides young people back to a life free of drugs and alcohol. All treatment is gender-specific and directed by caring certified professionals in a safe environment. You can get your daughter back and get to know her again. Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
And now, as promised, today's Last Word, spotlighting award-winning actor Charlie Sheen on making decisions in recovery.
It's not always the drugs and the booze, it's the decisions you make in those headspaces, and I'm just not in those headspaces anymore, and that's a freaking relief. When people start getting a sense that your energy is shifted and your aura is kind of groovy, that they're not in danger to be around you, that they're not at risk. That's how I've been making amends, just living better and behaving better, and just being available for whatever's next.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. If you've enjoyed our podcast, and I certainly hope you have, please share it with at least one other person. You can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with us, I'd love to hear from you. Our email is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free. You'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. If you're considering treatment for a friend or a loved one, or maybe even for yourself, be sure you visit NAATP.org/AID. That stands for the Addiction Information Directory. It's a list of treatment centers that adhere to strict ethical guidelines. Now, one of them is Sundown M Ranch, but there are a lot of other ones around the country as well. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. And another shout out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, where recovery begins. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.